This interview is part of the History Heard project. The content of this interview may be used for historical research. However, no part of the video itself may be reproduced without the express written permission of an authorized representative of History Heard. Today is July 27th, 2012 at 10:30 a.m. This is an interview with Martin Yudkovitz in New York City, New York. He was born on April 2nd, 1954 in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. After the Barcelona Olympics, he became interested in new media, well before it was the popular thing to do. As a senior executive in new media, you were the chief architect of several strategic projects, including NBC.com. Also prominently in that mix was MSNBC and MSNBC.com, which joined Microsoft NBC, and MSNBC was revolutionary in its marriage of cable television, internet services, became a big success. Can you tell us about the genesis of MSNBC and MSNBC.com a little bit?
Sure. Well, by that time, which was the early 90s, I had gotten quite a taste for startup businesses, for doing things that the company hadn't done before. And in terms of growth, that was very, very important because the broadcast business was, by that time, becoming a very mature business. It wasn't growing a lot. And in business, it's very important to keep growing.
Right.
So the way you keep growing is by finding new businesses to enter. The digital media, which I think we initially called interactive media, because it was the first time that the viewer could actually respond to what was on the screen. That was very, very much in its infancy. A lot of people, just like cable earlier, a lot of people just didn't believe in it. It looked pretty nerdy, geeky, it looked like gimmicky, and it wasn't going to have a big influence. And there was no such thing as a Google or Facebook or anything like that that had huge influence over people's lives. Mm-hmm. All of it felt very, very much on the margins, very much off to the side. But I was convinced, this was not my idea, but there were a bunch of very young people running around talking about online and talking about computers and talking about digital media. Nobody knew what they were talking about, and so they came to me and they said, listen, we don't want to listen to these people. Get them away from us. You talk to them. If they have anything interesting to say, you tell us about it. But basically tell them not to come see the rest of us, ever. Mm-hmm. So I talked to them, and I heard a lot of what they had to say. And a lot of what they had to say really made sense as technology keeps advancing, as memory and computer speeds keep improving, that there did seem to be an opportunity to create what we call a new media platform. And the thing that I found most interesting was they talked about a company called Microsoft. Now, at that time, that name, Microsoft, wasn't very well known at all. And the name Bill Gates was not very well known at all. It was a very young company, and they did something that seemed very esoteric, that people wouldn't really have to know a lot about. Maybe something like an Adobe or something like that today. Yeah, they do something with technology. I'm sure it's very, very important and very, very good, but it has not a lot of relevance to our lives. They said something very interesting about it, which is they controlled something called an operating system, and all these different computers, no matter who made them, anywhere in the world, and no matter what software they were running, had to go through what they called an operating system. Now, Apple at that time existed, but it was an extremely small player, fairly irrelevant off to the edges. And these folks convinced me that there was a real business opportunity with this one company that controlled the operating system. And as online became more mainstream, as something called the internet was started to be used, this operating system would be a very, very important point through which a lot of people would have to pass. So that sparked my interest a lot. We started talking to them very, very seriously. We formed a relationship, and then decided they want to form something called MSN, which was a portal. We wanted to expand our presence in news, and so we formed the joint venture, which created the cable news channel, which otherwise we never would have been able to afford to start, because Microsoft, frankly, lifted most of the economics. And we started MSNBC.com, which we could have started without Microsoft, but that distribution, the number of people who were on MSN, the number of people who went through Internet Explorer that Microsoft owned, the number of people that used that operating system was enormous. So within a year of launch, MSNBC.com was the #1 news site in the world.
Wow.
So the marriage made a lot of sense. Ironically, we're having this interview just a few days after it was announced that NBC and Microsoft have dissolved that joint venture 17 years after we created it.
Wow.
Times have changed.
How have you seen their services change since their launch? Have they kind of remained in the same trajectory, or have they kind of veered off at some point?
They, you meaning?
Meaning the MSNBC and MSNBC now.
Well, it's changed dramatically. It's changed dramatically. The first thing was that early on, this was very, very technology dependent. Mm-hmm. And so what you saw were bells and whistles, technological capabilities that if it weren't for Microsoft or someone of that level of technological sophistication, we could never have managed. Now the technology is very much in the background. There is still amazing technology going on, but it isn't the point anymore. It's supposed to be invisible to the consumer now. Back then, an introduction of the ability of an internet site to do this or to do that was quite an amazing thing, and that was always front and center. Now it's about the content, it's about the news, and that's why the need for an NBC to have a partner like Microsoft was just a lot less.
This interview is part of the History Heard project. The content of this interview may be used for historical research. However, no part of the video itself may be reproduced without the express written permission of an authorized representative of History Heard. Today is July 27th, 2012 at 10:30 a.m. This is an interview with Martin Yudkovitz in New York City, New York. He was born on April 2nd, 1954 in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. In 1995, as part of your new media focus at NBC, you created and became president of a division called NBC Digital Media, which was an investment arm of the company. And one of the investments you made was TiVo. And TiVo revolutionized how viewers watch television. Its DVR technology not only made it easy for viewers to record shows for later viewing, but also to fast forward through commercials. The latter technology, fast forwarding through commercials, created an uproar from broadcast networks because it was seen as technology that undermined the ability to generate revenue through advertising. Can you tell us about this conflict a little bit?
Sure. You're right. We had a group called NBC Digital Media, and it did a number of different things. We started NBC.com, for example, and did interactive DVDs. But one of the things that we did was invest in companies. TiVo was one of those companies that we invested in, and that was it was a good example because the point of the investments wasn't just to get a financial return. The point of the investment was to learn about these new technologies and these new approaches to media that Silicon Valley and other people were developing, and to help try and influence the direction that some of them took, and also through this learning and these investments for our own strategic direction to be influenced. Exactly how should NBC define its technology and new media future? And a lot of what was going on that we learned about through these investments caused us to make decisions about our strategic direction. TiVo was a good example because not only did we invest in TiVo, we invested in their primary competitor, who was called Replay. There were two, and they were both neck and neck in the field. They were both good competitors. They both had good technology. And we invested in both very early on. And we tried to influence their direction. And one of the things we said was we understand that the commercial fast forwarding is an important part of this technology. It's at the heart of this technology. But there are certain ways to present that can be more or less disruptive to the media industry that you, TiVo and Replay, depend on. If there isn't great popularity of television, if there aren't great TV programs, well then there's not going to be anything to record that people want to fast forward through.
Right.
So we suggested that one of these companies had both companies actually had technology that allowed a 30-second skip. where you didn't fast forward through the commercial, you just skipped it. And we suggested that that was a bad idea. It was not in their own best interests. And TiVo understood what we were saying and agreed, and eliminated that part of the technology, and Replay didn't. And sure enough, TiVo, because of reasons like that, got a lot of industry support over time, and Replay didn't, and Replay went out of business. So that was an example of us learning, us influencing, and the whole thing causing the strategic direction of some of our own decisions to be determined. We thought at the time that the disruptive level from commercial fast forwarding would be, once the penetration of these devices was very high, would be very, very great. It turns out that a couple of things have happened since then. One is that cable companies provided their own digital video recorder technology without using TiVo or anyone else. And the second thing is that, yes, because of the cable distribution of this technology, the technology did penetrate into an awful lot of homes, about where we had predicted it would. What we were surprised about was that it has not caused too terrible a disruption of commercial viewing. First of all, people watch an awful lot of television live. Second of all, it turns out that by recording television, people watch shows that otherwise they wouldn't have had time to watch. And even during the playback of those shows, most of the commercials are not fast forwarded. So it turns out, actually, net, more commercials are viewed because DVRs exist than if they didn't exist. Now, again, there is a technology that Dish is trying to introduce where there would be a 30-second skip button instead of a fast forwarding button. And we think that that is inappropriate. We think it might be illegal. And we think that it's certainly not smart, because that could be damaging to the industry. And if the industry is damaged, well, not only are we damaged, but Dish itself, which is a satellite distributor of television, they would be damaged. So it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And it isn't something that the consumer seems to think is all that necessary anyway. So there's a lot of controversy going on around that right now. But the DVR has ended up being the friend of a lot of television, especially broadcast networks that have the big name TV shows that people can't always see live. And so the ability to record it and watch it later has been an important part of the total viewership that we now have.